Hi there, my name is Kristen Threed and I'm one of the education coordinators at Old St. Canal Park in Moncks Corner, South Carolina. And today we are taking a virtual field trip to learn all about the history of indigo in South Carolina. Now, indigo has been used for thousands of years worldwide for a blue dye. So when we hear the word indigo, we often think about that color in the rainbow. It's kind of a purplish blue color. And we think about blue jeans, right? Because for many, many years, indigo was used to tint our blue jeans that we're so fond of. But indigo itself is a plant, all right? Looks like this. So there are many different species of indigo that grow throughout the world, but throughout history, the most reputable species, the ones that produce the most potent dye and that most beautiful blue color, is Indigofera tinctoria and Indigofera subfruticosa. So throughout history, those are the species that we hear a lot about that are producing the beautiful blue color. Now, even though that beautiful flower that we see, all right, so it's got this lovely pink-purple flower, remarkably enough, the dye itself is actually in the stems and leaves. So when we talk about harvesting indigo here in just a little bit, we're going to talk about how we actually extract that blue color from these stems and leaves. Okay? So indigo has played a major role throughout history providing this blue color, because blue is not really a color you find naturally in nature. So many thousands of years ago, when people figured out how to do this, this became a very, very important plant to humankind. Now, Indigofera tinctoria is originally grown and cultivated in Asia, while Indigofera subfruticosa is originally from Central and South America. But once travel and passages start opening up in the 14 and 1500s, indigo starts making its trek around the globe. And especially in the 1600s, when England gets its hand on indigo for the first time, it becomes very obsessed with the color blue and with indigo. So England starts buying large amounts of indigo, large quantities, so that they can turn everything in their life blue, right? They want to be turning their furniture and their clothing using that indigo to turn things blue. Remember, in history, the color blue was a symbol of nobility and status and wealth. So once people could get a reputable dye source for this color, they were going to buy lots of it. But it was very, very expensive. So England starts looking to other parts of the world that maybe they can grow it themselves. Now, if we think about the 1600s, in the New World, England has control of these colonies. And especially in the southern colonies, it has just the right climate, more of that tropical climate that's needed for indigo. And this is when we meet someone named Eliza Lucas. So Eliza is actually born in Antigua in 1722. Now, when she is 17, in 1739, her father, George Lucas, actually inherits 3 plantations here in the Charleston area. So he packs up the whole family and they actually move here to Charleston. Now, soon after their arrival, her father is called back to Antigua and her mother, unfortunately, becomes ill. So the responsibility of running these 3 plantations actually falls to Eliza herself. Now, this is kind of a big deal for a 17-year-old girl, especially during this time period. Now, women could be educated, but they weren't normally put in charge of things, especially not 3 plantations, right? So she takes this challenge in stride. She's well educated, and she really has an affinity for plants and botany. So her goal, and she soon makes it her challenge, to expand these plantations and kind of expand what they're growing and producing. So she reaches out to her father in Antigua and asks for more seeds and says, can you please send me some more seeds so we can try growing new things? And he's able to send her ginger and alfalfa and cotton, and he's able to send her indigo. Now, Eliza knows the demand in England for indigo is great, and if they are able to grow, cultivate, and extract this dye, that will be massively successful. So she starts trying to do this. Now, it takes several years for her to be able to produce a successful crop on her plantations and be able to extract the dye. Now, all this work, of course, is going to be done by enslaved laborers, and there have to be very, very skilled dye extractors that know how to do this. So it takes several years to figure out this process and be able to do it successfully. But once they do, by the end of the 1740s, Carolina indigo, and this indigo that's being shipped out to England, has actually exploded. So by the end of the 1740s, they are sending back over 200,000 pounds of Carolina grown indigo, okay? And they would be growing probably Indigofera subfruticosa at this point. So they've gotten that South American and Central American indigo, processing it, and they're able to send it back to England. So 200,000 pounds at the end of the 1740s. By the Revolutionary War, the Carolinas are sending back over 1 million pounds of indigo to England annually. All right, so this is a huge deal. This makes it the second most important cash crop of South Carolina at the time, preceded only by rice and then followed by cotton and tobacco. So when the Revolutionary War happens, though, this demand for that indigo kind of dries up. It's still being produced locally for local uses, but really the need for producing so much of that indigo is kind of gone. So at this point, indigo as a crop and as a successful production kind of dries up and dwindles. And so it really has this brief 30-year history in South Carolina, but it made quite an impact. So let's talk a little bit about how it's extracted and processed and then shipped. Now, the growing and extracting of indigo can be kind of a tedious process, and it does take a lot of time and skill. But the first thing you have to do, obviously, is you have to grow these plants. So you're going to take those seeds, those Indigofera saffruticosa seeds, and you're going to plant them in the springtime, about April, okay? Now, we'll hopefully get your first harvest in July, and if you're lucky, you get a second harvest in September. Now, once you have those cuttings, right, so you're going to cut those plants that we saw before with just the leaves. So you actually want to harvest it before those flowers pop, because that's when the dye is its most potent, most powerful. So once you have those clippings, you're going to take them, and we're actually, especially in the 18th century, you're going to employ something called a vat system. So vat, VAT, is something that holds a lot of liquid, and because the extraction of indigo dye really is so dependent on water and a soaking and stirring process, this is the best way to go. So the first thing we would do is take those clippings and put them in this top vat, okay? This is the same setup, just different perspectives. So we're going to take those clippings and put them in that top vat. We're going to weigh them down with heavy stones and cover it with water, okay? So you're going to let this water sit because really we want to start a fermentation process. So we're going to let that water and those clippings weighed down by those stones sit for at least a day. So after we've left that mixture sit for about 24 hours, we're going to come back. We're going to notice that those plants are nice and mushy and well soaked, and that liquid, that water that we put in there, is already starting to turn a yellow-green color, and that's how we know that we're moving in the right direction. So at this point, you're going to remove those clippings, and you're just going to move the liquid itself, that yellow-green liquid, into that second vat, all right? This is when the agitation part of the process is going to start. And it's very important to keep agitating and stirring the liquid that is in this vat, because by introducing oxygen, you're actually able to separate out the indigo itself, the blue substance, able to separate that out from the water, okay? Now, there are some methods in the 1700s that included the addition of other substances to try and extract the dye. It really depended on the extractor itself and that particular person. But really that agitation process is what we're focused on. So after 8 to 12 hours of this agitation and stirring process, that indigo, that blue substance that we're looking for, is now settled on the bottom, and now we have clear water on the top. So at that point, we're going to drain off that clear water, right? We're done with that. And what we want is now sitting almost as sediment, right? So it's going to be sitting at the bottom of that vat. So at this point, it kind of has the consistency of like pudding, okay? So we're going to scrape out that indigo pudding, and now what we need to do is dry it. So we're going to take that indigo substance that we've extracted, we're going to put it into molds that look like bars of soap, and we're going to have it in an open air shed. So it's going to have a roof, open sides, and we're going to let it dry for several days. And once it's dry, we're going to produce something called an indigo brick or an indigo cake. And it's going to look something like this, all right? So, once we have produced this indigo brick, this is what is being shipped back to England, okay? So you can really, there we go, you can really see how intense that color is. Very, very potent stuff. But this is what is going to be shipped back to Europe and England. All right, so just like this. So if you think about it too, this is actually pretty easy to ship compared to other crops like rice, which is big and bulky and heavy. This, you can put several of these in a wooden crate and ship it back. So once England receives this, now they're ready to start working on the dyeing process, which we're going to talk about next. All right, so we're going to have our indigo brick, all right? And the first step in order to start the dyeing process is we have to get this into a form that's easy to use, right? So we're going to take our brick and we're actually going to turn it into a powder, all right? So it's going to be more of a powder consistency, so you're going to crush that up, all right? And we have to turn this solid into a liquid. So next step is we are going to add water to this, all right? Now, when you are making an indigo vat, right, something that you can actually dip fabric in to turn it blue, you're going to start with your indigo and water. But if you don't add anything else to it, that indigo color will not be color fast. That means it won't actually stick to the fabric itself, and it will rinse out. So when you are putting together an indigo vat, you have to have indigo, water, and then some additional materials. Now, in olden times, they would have used things that were highly acidic that they could get their hands on, such as urine, which I know is kind of gross, or they could have used lime. And again, those things would have helped the blue color stick to the fabric. Nowadays, we use things called hydro and soda ash, which you can use in crafts and painting. And those are all things that you need to add together to make our indigo vat. So I've actually prepared one of those for us today. And we're actually going to take a look. All right. So when we're making our indigo vat, we would put in our hydro and our soda ash and our indigo, right, into warm water, and we're going to stir it. Now the process of stirring it and bringing all those together is going to create this little pile of bubbles on top, and this is called the bloom. It kind of acts as a little hat to the indigo, and kind of sits on top. But in order to start actually dyeing with it, we kind of need to get some of these bubbles off of there, because if we don't, it'll actually just stick to your fabric and not allow the actual dye to penetrate it. So I'm going to go ahead and get that off. I'm going to make sure we get, it also has a little oil slick, like an oil sheen on there, and we want to get that off too. So now the cool thing about indigo is that the liquid in here is actually a yellow-green color, okay? And indigo, in order to turn blue, actually has to hit the air. It has to oxidize. So when we go to put fabric into the vat, we're actually going to watch it turn colors, okay? So this is our piece of fabric, all right? And I'm going to dip it in here. And anytime you're dipping, you actually don't need to agitate it at all, all right? But look at that. So that is what a piece of fabric comes out looking as, right? It's going to be that yellow-green color. And then as it hits the air and begins the oxidation process, then it actually starts turning blue in front of your eyes. It's pretty amazing. And this process takes about 4 minutes, and at the end of that time, this will be totally blue. So it's a little known fact. If we literally left this piece of fabric in the indigo and never took it out, it would just stay that yellow-green color. All right, so now let's talk about some designs. All right, now the process of manipulating fabric with different materials before putting them into an indigo vat, it actually goes all the way back 3,000 or 4,000 years, and originally to the Japanese, which is what we call shibori. Now it's what we call tie-dye, right? When you use rubber bands and you make designs on fabric and then insert it into indigo or a dye. But there are lots of different ways to do this. You can use popsicle sticks, wooden blocks, twine, rubber bands, right? So they can really vary, you know, and you can also do plain blue. That's probably the simplest one. So plain blue can do things as complicated as a wood block print, okay? All right, but I'm going to show you a couple of really simple ones that you can do with rubber bands as well, all right? So one of those is going to be the circle, okay? And to do this, you'd pinch it in the middle, grab it, make a little ghost, all right? So he's going to look like this when he goes in the vat. So we'll do that in a second. And then the other one is going to be a stripe, right? And you can do multiple stripes or circles if you'd like. So we'll go ahead and put those in here. And the idea is that you are gathering that fabric and tying it off with a rubber band so that the dye actually can't get to that part of the fabric. It can't penetrate it, and then there'll be a stripe there once we take it off. And the same is true with our little circle. All right, and again, it's going to be that yellow-green color, right, until it's able to oxidize. So let me get these rubber bands off, and we will take a look at those designs. All right, so let's look at our designs real quick that we made. So first, we're going to have our circle. We remove those rubber bands. And when you first remove them, remember some of this might still be a yellow-green color because it hasn't had a chance to fully oxidize yet. But it will, so that's our circle. And you can always repeat this pattern, right? Circle within circles, or have a couple of different ones. And then you can also do a stripe, right? So, and friends, if you want to do this at home, there are some easy starter kits. I know Jacquard makes one. These can be found on Amazon or Dharma Trading. So you can always start doing this at home. But be warned, because you will get really into it and want to dye everything in your house. So thank you so much for joining me on this field trip today. I've had a great time talking with you about the history of indigo in South Carolina, and we look forward to seeing you again at the park real soon. Thanks.